posted their second straight quarter of double-digit gains. They benefited from frenetic buying and selling across Wall Street at the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Revenue from fixed income trading rose 13% to 1.85 billion euros. And while that trails the average gain among the biggest US banks, it was better than expected. The German lender sees overall revenue slightly lower this year. And if we take a look at how Deutsche Bank is doing this morning, those shares are up 2.7%. We're on a third day of gains.
Yeah, and turning to other banking shares, banking areas at the moment, it was a blockbuster first quarter for traders at Barclays. The securities division reported a 77% jump in trading revenue. That was overshadowed, however, by a $2.6 billion bad loan charge stemming from the virus outbreak. Barclays joined its peers in warning that tough times lie ahead. I'm just trying to get a read on Barclays shares at the moment. I'm not having much success. I don't know if you've got any better success than I have, Nera.
We're up 5.3%, so 3 days of gains are there on Barclays. And, you do wonder whether it is really the trading numbers there that are in focus for investors rather than the provisions, given that those shares are 5% higher. Now, Standard Chartered also joining the chorus of banks putting money aside for bad loan provisions. So it's reserving over $950 million for potential losses. First quarter earnings for the Asia-focused lender slid 12% to $1.22 billion. That beat expectations. Like other UK banks, Standard Chartered has cancelled share buybacks and dividends. We asked about the outlook for those buybacks and dividends in the TV interview. Weren't given any specific guidance, nor actually on the outlook for loan loss provisions for the rest of the year. But if you look at Standard Chartered shares, they're rising in London. Initially, they were up 6.5%. We're up 5.9% right now. And again, Roger, that's potentially because the earnings beat, but also because that number of just over $950 million put aside for potential losses was actually lower than the $1.3 billion consensus going into the numbers. So a positive reaction in Standard Chartered shares there.
Right, let's get up to speed with latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. And Leanne, you begin with the virus picture in the US.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Roger. So we'll start right there. In the US, coronavirus cases have passed the 1 million mark. Deaths have risen above 58,000. That's now more American lives lost than during the Vietnam War. And in a move criticized by labor unions, President Donald Trump is telling meat processing plants to stay open. He signed the executive order saying closures threaten food supply chains. Now, in Europe, France plans to begin reopening shops on the 11th of May, while in Spain, the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, says most restrictions on daily life will be removed over the next 8 weeks. Bloomberg's Laura Milan says the road back to normal will happen in 4 stages.
Progress will be different for each of the country's provinces. Those with fewer coronavirus cases will resume economic and social activities faster. The Canary Islands and the Balearic Islands are expected to be among the first to make progress. Bars, restaurants and hotels will open first at a limited capacity. In Madrid, Laura Milan, Bloomberg, Daybreak, Europe.
Singapore is in the process of scaling up its medical facilities by adding capacity at isolation wards and intensive care units. This comes as a confirmed number of virus cases nears 15,000, making it Asia's most infected country after China and India. Bloomberg's Philip Hymans reports.
More than 18,000 beds have been created for isolation and medical care needs. Another 23,000 are in the pipeline. Singapore, which reported 528 cases on Tuesday, is grappling with a rise in the number of infections among migrant workers, often living in cramped dormitories after initially being lauded for its response in the early months. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. 13 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. The stock 600 barely moves, but we are up 0.2%. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Manus Cranny.
Standard Chartered has put aside $956 million against potential losses as problem loans spike during the coronavirus pandemic. And joining us now is the CFO, Andy Halford. So, Andy, great to have you with Naira and I this morning. The market wants to get to grips with understanding where you are right now with your loan loss provisions and how tough or how bad a number we could look at for 2020. So take us through the numbers and the guidance for the end of the year.
Okay, good morning to you. So just very quickly on the numbers, we've actually had a strong start to the year, especially given the external environment. So our top line actually was up by 6% for the quarter, and that was in a period when particularly the coronavirus was impacting our businesses in Northern Asia. So overall, actually a very strong start on the top line, good control of expenses. The one area that you referred to where we have taken additional charges was the credit impairment. And I think like with most banks, there has been obviously a need to top up on the provisions given the current environment.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, we are seeing European equities mostly in the green this morning. The FTSE leading gains up 0.4% here in London. The DAX up 0.2%. The CAC 40 just up 0.1%. The Stock 600 flat at the moment. US equity futures pointing higher. It follows a fairly positive day in Asian trading as investors take heart from some of the earnings we've had out. If we take a look at the bond markets this morning, 10-year Treasury yield down a basis point at 60 basis points this morning. 10-year bund yields holding at negative 47. 10-year gilt yields holding at 29 basis points. I'm keeping a particular eye, though, on 10-year BTP yields jumping 7 basis points to 1.80% this morning. This after Fitch downgraded Italy's sovereign credit rating in a surprise move yesterday. Now, the risk-on sentiment in the markets is sending the dollar lower for a third day, currently weaker by 0.3%. In turn, most other G10 currencies are rallying. Kiwi and Aussie dollars leading gains, currently up 0.7% after better than expected economic data out of both countries. The yen also bid at 106.5, sterling gaining to 124, the euro at 108 this morning. Oil is advancing after losing more than a quarter of its value over the past 2 days. WTI up 14% at $14 a barrel. Brent also bid at $21 a barrel, but do bear in mind we could see some volatility today with June Brent futures due to expire tomorrow. That's a Bloomberg Business Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you so much. In Germany, the number of new coronavirus cases rose for the first time in 3 days. That's as the government weighs whether to relax some restrictions. Yesterday, there were 1,154 additional infections, taking the total to nearly 200,000. Chancellor Angela Merkel is preparing to consult with state leaders on whether to further relax restrictions on public life. Now in Russia, President Vladimir Putin is ordering citizens to stay under lockdown until the 11th of May after the total number of coronavirus cases in the country surpassed China's. Putin said the restrictions in place for a month have slowed the pandemic, but he warned the improving weather and the coming up holiday weekends may test his people's resolve. And finally, in the US, Vice President Mike Pence is under fire for disregarding virus policy on face masks when visiting a top clinic. The Centers for Disease Control recommends masks in public, and Pence himself has reportedly urged Americans to follow that guidance. However, he was the only person without a mask at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. He says he's regularly tested and doesn't have the virus. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Brussels edition, Bloomberg's briefing on what matters most in the European Union this week.
Well, welcome to this special episode of the Brussels edition. I'm Maria today, and this week we're looking at the European Central Bank. The Governing Council will deliver its latest monetary policy decision amid a backdrop of economic uncertainty and market volatility as a result of the coronavirus. What can Christine Lagarde do next, and what else are we going to see from the ECB tomorrow? Now, joining me now is Francesco Papadia, who's a former Director General for Markets at the European Central Bank. Good morning to you. Moving to the European Central Bank, I just want to get your thoughts on the breaking news that we just had over the past 24 hours, that credit rating downgrade to Italy from Fitch. It's unnerving markets today, but are you surprised by the move?
Not really. I think that the situation in Italy is precarious. Of course, there is an element of discretion. Not every rating agency is moving. But yes, it's somewhat unexpected that could happen.
And on that note, the question now is really, what can the European Central Bank do next? We know that they are buying in the market already. There has been moves to try to help countries like Italy from credit rating downgrades. But at this point, what do you see Christine Lagarde doing tomorrow to almost shield the European economy even further?
Well, I think that it's clear that the ECB is going to do more. The question is whether this will be tomorrow or quite later in over time. I think it's not likely that they will do a lot tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow they could do some ancillary measures. They could increase the threshold over which banks don't have to pay the penalty rate on the deposit rate facility. They could lower the rate on the TLTRO. I don't think that the time is right now for increasing the size of the purchases. Also because they are waiting for the government to come up with something more significant than what came out from the last European Council. So yes, they will do something more, not necessarily on Thursday.
I see. And just to make it clear, you don't actually see the ECB increasing the PPP program tomorrow. You don't see that happening immediately.
But I think it's not likely. Of course, it could be. It could happen. But I don't think it's likely. I think it's more likely that they will take sort of smaller measures, hinting that they would do more. I think they've always said that they're willing to do more if needed. It would not sound good to just to react to a downgrade in the ratings.
So you don't see an actual response to the downgrade. And I just want to ask you, you mentioned right now that the ECB is probably waiting to see what European governments do next. I'm just wondering, do you worry about the inaction that we're seeing from the European Union? We've seen meetings pretty much every week, but European politicians don't really agree much on paper. And does that mean the European Central Bank is having to do too much?
Yes, I mean, this is a recurrent story. I mean, the ECB does a lot. and governments in the euro area don't do a lot on time. Of course, it's not clear that they will not do something. The last European Council expressed some views about things to do more, but we don't know exactly what more, when they will do more. So yes, there is an element of uncertainty on their side that is bearing on the ECB.
And Mr. Papadia, you know the ECB very well, and you also know that the criticism from some is that the ECB is almost now doing fiscal transfers undercover. Is that something that you would agree with, or you actually think the action that is being taken is warranted to prevent fragmentation?
Well, I think that the action is warranted to prevent segmentation, but at the same time, it's clear that the border between fiscal policy and monetary policy is being blurred. This is necessary now because the situation is so exceptional. This is happening everywhere, I would say. This is happening in the UK, this is happening in the US, and this is happening in Japan. Everywhere central banks are blurring the borders with fiscal policy. This is inevitable. It's unwelcome. It's undesirable, but it's inevitable.
And just to focus on Italy, of course, as a country that you know very well, this is at the center of the storm, very complicated politics, difficult relationship with the European Union at this point, and of course a very big debt pile. Do you worry about debt sustainability in Italy going forward? I know there's predictions already that see 150% of GDP.
Well, I think the situation, I would define the situation as precarious. Precarious means that yes, there are risks, but no, there is a definite view that debt in Italy is unsustainable. And what matters a lot is what the Italian government will do going forward, because what happens now is important, but for debt sustainability, what is even more important is the long-term prospect. So if the Italian government manages to send a message that they will be prudent in their fiscal policy, and most of all, that they will achieve a higher growth for the country, that is the most critical variable, then the debt is sustainable.
And Mr. Papadia, when you look at the Conte government, Conte 2, and you see the actions that they're taking, and the fact that they're still almost saying they don't want to tap the ESM, that they still believe the way to go about this is through the recovery fund, is that something that you think is appropriate? And ultimately, do you see Italy having to tap into the ESM?
Well, the story about the ESM is a bit blown out of proportion. It's not a big deal to take it or not to take it. I don't see why Italy should not take it, because in any case, it's some help in terms.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. Supporting people to live life to the fullest, it's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others, make a difference. Today, search adult social care jobs now.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
Gradually fade. Will they keep buying the same amount of bonds, or what will happen when QE has to be tapered in maybe 1 year from now? So it is a very fragile environment for Italy. It needs a very clear plan on how to get out of this. At the moment, they don't have it.
So essentially, it's a very tricky situation, and of course the politics are not helping, but really the bottom line is the debt pile really sustainable or not? When you look at Italy right now, even at 150% of GDP by the end of the year, do you look at that and go, this is payable, this is sustainable? That's not really the question.
Politically, you are in front of a crossroads here. You can either step down and accept the risks that will come from the market or from exogenous factors like the virus, or you're going to force central banks to keep going for much longer. So this is, I think, what will happen. There will be a political negotiation, but eventually central banks across the world will be forced to stay locked into stimulus for a lot longer, what we called QE infinity over the last few years, which also means that there will be a transfer of risk from governments from the private sector to governments. Governments will take on a lot more risks in the private sector. Governments are bailing out entire sectors. Thinking about airlines, for example, or car makers, and other even holiday makers have been bailed out in some countries. And essentially, we're going into a version of capitalism which has much more government intervention. This was already a trend a few months ago, a few quarters ago. There was discussion of modern monetary theory, of universal basic income to fix all the inequalities that were generated in the last stimulus in the last 10 years. But these trends are being accelerated. The pandemic is essentially accelerating history here. And when a government is put in front of the political choice, whether to let things go and face a potential breakup, or use fiscal and monetary policy to the extreme to maintain, to preserve the Eurozone, or to preserve its own power, then it will choose the second option. It will blur the lines of monetary and fiscal policy, will lock central banks into more stimulus, and eventually it will blur the lines of monetary and fiscal policy, will lock central banks into more stimulus, and eventually we are locked into a more state-driven capitalism economy. For Italy, obviously, there is a political negotiation. They will have to do some reforms, and the path is not a straight path. But eventually, I can see a technocratic government that has to do reforms in exchange for more help from Brussels and Frankfurt.
And let's talk about the QE infinity going into the ECB tomorrow. I know that you've said that at this point it's almost completely off the table that we're going to see normalization in monetary policy. I'm just wondering, how far can the European Central Bank go? And do you actually expect tomorrow to see a decision on the PPP program?
The ECB today faces first one administrative issue, which is they're front-loading the program. They're buying more bonds that they can, so they're anticipating purchases. They need to increase the size of the program. They are planning to buy in 2020 around $1 trillion of bonds, but the Fed has already increased their purchases, and so they'll have to increase the size of the program, both because they're competing with other central banks that are more aggressive, and they don't want the euro to go up, Second, because short-term funding costs in the EUR market are going up as the Federal Reserve has lower dollar funding costs. People are switching from euro to dollar funding. And third, because they've already bought more bonds than the pro rata size of the program allows. So that's something that I would expect in this meeting, or maybe anyway relatively soon. Next, there are other issues that will present themselves. One of them is Italian spreads, and generally periphery spreads are still very fragmented. And also the spreads of companies in the periphery are very fragmented. So if you're a high-yield firm, if you're a good firm, even an investment-grade firm in the periphery, you may pay 2 or 3 times more for your funding compared to a German firm. And these obviously fragment economy. So you need to give more stimulus to the real economy, what the Bank for International Settlement has called the last mile. So they may do something more to deviate from the capital key, or they may do something more to go into high-yield firms. I don't expect this at this meeting, but later on. The problem is they are pulling most of the weight here, and Eurozone governments have been very lackluster in delivering a credible fiscal stimulus. So the ECB balance sheet will reach over 50% of GDP this year. It's currently 5.3 trillion. It's going to go to about 6 trillion by the end of the year. That's a big milestone compared to the Fed, which is roughly half versus GDP, and getting closer to the BRJ, which is 100+% of GDP. So there's still some room, but the ammunition is fewer than it was years ago.
Well, thank you to Alberto Gallo, who is portfolio manager at Algebris, and also we want to thank Francesco Papadia, who was on the phone with us before that, former Director General for Markets at the European Central Bank. And that is it for the Brussels edition special for this week. I'm Maria Tadeo. Neira?
Maria, thank you so much. And having a look at BTPs right now, we're seeing the 10-year BTP yield up 6 basis points. We're just below a 180 handle. Interesting what Alberto was saying there, not just about the sovereign, but also about the credit relative from the periphery to the core, and how that can also put more pressure and fragmentation in the Eurozone, Roger.
Yeah, I mean, Italy is in a very interesting position at the moment, a very difficult position. And the central question they've been asking of Europe from the beginning still hasn't really been answered, the extent to which Europe is prepared to carry the burden of its weaker members.
Absolutely. Now for the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira, and thank you. Coronavirus cases in the US passed the 1 million mark and deaths topped 58,000, double the toll in Italy. That's now more American lives lost than during the Vietnam War. And in a move criticized by labor unions, President Donald Trump is telling meat processing plants to stay open. He signed the executive order saying closures threaten food supplies. Now, Spain is preparing for a new normal as Europe's hardest hit nation removes restrictions over the next 8 weeks. Meanwhile, France plans to reopen shops and schools from the 11th of May with a lot of restrictions, but only if the coronavirus spread is contained by then. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum has more on the French government's cautious approach.
Large events are suspended until September, including soccer games. Traveling won't be easy, and masks will become mandatory in public transport. The Prime Minister has been clear there's a fine line to walk. Be too carefree, and the epidemic restarts. Be too cautious, and the entire economy sinks. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, China will hold its highest profile annual political meeting on the 22nd of May. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The annual meetings of the NPC were scheduled for early March, but postponed due to the virus. The government uses these meetings to set a growth target and make projections on defense spending. But party leaders have recently softened their tone on targets. If they do release one, it will attract enormous attention. Just how bad was the outbreak? Well, a Bloomberg survey sees growth at just 1.8% in 2020. Now, a higher target means more stimulus would be coming. A lower one, not so much. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Australia is stoking tensions with China with the government calling for an independent probe into the origins of coronavirus. Beijing is pushing back, saying calls for the investigation are, quote, politically motivated. It's also warning of a potential consumer boycott of Australian products. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. And Roger, so much to focus on today in earnings season. We're deep in bank earnings season, and it really seems to be that the takeaway is low loss provisions bad, trading good.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, a Standard Chartered caught my eye particularly because they are talking about a gradual recovery. They fall in a line, I guess, with many of the others, but it's that twist between what you can earn from a lot of trading off the back of volatility, and on the other side, of course, this huge provision for bad loans, which they all seem to be bearing.
Yeah, absolutely. The trading side of the story was sort of more to do with Barclays and Deutsche Bank. For Standard Chartered, they did have that $956 million loan loss provision, which wasn't quite as bad as what consensus had been expecting, but their earnings did beat. So those shares have moved higher on that. If we take a look at what else we look at, it's the Fed, of course, not expecting any big moves, but it's going to be all about the guidance. It's going to be about whether we hear any kind of signals on yield curve control or on the pace of bond buying, and then also what is known as the Evans rule, because back in 2012, the FOMC issued guidance saying it would keep rates low until the unemployment rate fell below 6.5% or inflation rose above 2.5%. Will we get any sort of guidance or signals of that to come? In markets, we were seeing quite a bit of risk on previously. I was questioning why that was, and that is starting to fade now. The Stock 600 dead flat, and US futures coming off their highs as well, up 0.6% on E-minis. The 10-year yield drops 2 basis points. This is Bloomberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new...
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home, Supporting people to live life to the fullest, it's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others. Make a difference. Today. Search adult social care jobs now.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, video call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact. Just show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Wi-Fi connection spotty? Make sure you're never without something to listen to by offlining your podcasts on TuneIn. Just find your favorite podcast and tap the three dots to download the episodes you want to hear. When you're off the grid, you'll find all your offline audio under your favorites.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, European stocks are fairly in the green today, with the FTSE leading gains currently up 0.7%. This in part thanks to some strong results from some of the major lenders. Standard Chartered gaining 5%, Barclays surging 6%. Standard Chartered actually beat on pretty much all metrics, so that was pretty good for the emerging market lender. Otherwise, it is looking a bit flat out there. The Stock 600, the DAX, the CAC 40 all unchanged at the moment. US futures pointing to a higher open though. Now, we have seen 10-year Treasury yields fall about 2 basis points, currently trading at 59 basis points. Similar moves in 10-year bund yields at negative 49 at the moment. 10-year gilt yields at 27 basis points. But of particular interest is BTP yields, the 10-year jumping 7 basis points after Fitch downgraded Italy's sovereign credit rating yesterday. Now, the risk on sentiment we saw in markets earlier this morning has set the dollar a bit lower for a third day, down 0.3% at the moment. In turn, most other G10 currencies are rallying. Kiwi and Aussie dollars leading the gains, currently up 0.7% after better than expected economic data. It's a bit more of a modest gain for the yen, up 0.4% at 106.4. Sterling at 124. The euro at 108 at the moment. Finally, oil is advancing after losing more than a quarter of its value over the past 2 days. WTI at $14 a barrel. Brent gaining 4% to $21 a barrel. But we could see some volatility in prices today, with June Brent futures due to expire tomorrow. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Italy saw the number of total coronavirus cases surpass the 200,000 mark yesterday. That's as Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is coming under fire from coalition allies for his cautious approach to easing the national lockdown. Italy is set to start to loosen lockdown measures on the 4th of May. Now, Europe took another step towards life after lockdown. France plans to begin reopening shops on May the 11th, while Spain is preparing for a new normal as Europe's hardest hit nation removes restrictions over the next 8 weeks. Germany reported that the number of new cases increased for the first time in 3 days. And finally, streamed films will be eligible for next year's Oscars because the pandemic has forced cinemas to shut. It means movies will be considered for the awards in 2021, even if they made their debut streaming or on-demand platforms. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now let's get back to oil rebounding today after losing more than a quarter of its value in the past 2 days. According to Russia's energy minister, the oil market may only start to recover in the second half of the year. The drop in prices is a key risk factor for the Russian economy, which is also grappling with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. For more, we're pleased to be joined by the CEO of Russian lender VTB Bank, Andrei Kostin. Andrei, so great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a number of bank earnings, of course, that we've had this week, and the big focus has been on loan loss provisions as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. What can you tell us, first of all, about the impact on your bank of coronavirus? Are you setting aside more loan loss provisions, or is the issue being reflected in your bank in a different way?
Good morning again. And first of all, we just released, the Russian government just released the new figures for the virus. There's 5,800 new cases, the growth of about 6.2% over the night, and altogether there's a 99.4 thousand people with the coronavirus in Russia. I very much hope that we reach the peak because the new cases number is not increasing very much. It's between 5,000 and 6,000 every day. But of course, you mentioned about this. The main reason for economic problem today is virus. It's quite unnatural for economic crisis because they all started with the financial sector, and now the financial sector probably is the last to be affected. And frankly speaking, the Russian banking sector does not very much yet feel the consequences of this crisis. Russian banking sector had a very successful last year. The total amount of net profit was around 1.7 trillion, which is about $22 billion. And the first quarter was very strong. But we expect, of course, that the profitability and the income will substantially drop during the second and particularly third quarter. How much it will be, it's very difficult to predict because we are not dealing with the normal, I would say, economic financial crisis. We are dealing with a crisis caused by the viruses. And I'm not an expert in viruses, so I can't say how long it will continue. And most important, how long the lockdown. But there's more now evidence that lockdown probably will start to release after the long May holiday, after the 12th of May, because the President Putin already gave instruction to the government to draft a program how we'll relax these restrictions. So it's very hard to say how the banking sector will be affected, but we expect definitely that according to our former experience, the number of non-performing debt can increase, maybe can double. But I think that even in such a situation, Russian banking sector will stand it.
So you are making loan loss provisions there, that is going on?
We are not at the moment, maybe unlike some Americans and European banks, we are not making any provisions after the first quarter results. We'll be doing it in the second quarter, and we still have to see how much will be affected. Of course, some of the government program introduced, they will affect the profitability of the banks, but we still believe that even the second quarter we might finish with some positive results rather than the negative. We'll still have to see how our clients will behave.
Okay, understood. And Andrei, I mean, you've cautioned about profitability in the coming quarters, even if there's not a lot of visibility. I want to ask about liquidity, because Russians, as far as we understand, have been pulling money out of banks recently. They might continue to do so because of the lockdown. At VTB, do you and other banks face liquidity problems in the coming months or even already?
We don't have too much problem at the moment. You know, since the crisis in 2008, 2009, when we were abruptly cut off the foreign funding, we developed the domestic resources mainly. So at the moment in Russia, there's approximately 2.5 trillion rubles extra liquidity, which the bank's keeping with the central bank. So we still use this, what we call pillar of security. We still have more liquidity than probably we need. And in case of the shortage, we know that during the crisis in 2008, 2009, there were a number of instruments which central bank did not yet use to provide more liquidity for the banking sector. So we are not so much concerned about actual liquidity. We're probably more concerned about the capital, but still the capital adequacy of the Russian banking sector at the moment stands at 12.5%. So I think it still can accumulate some of the bad loan provisions even more, particularly as the central banks relaxed some regulations on this and allow us, at least for this year, to provide less provisions and probably less capital for the operations.
Andrei, what does that mean for dividend payments? I mean, a lot of banks are shrinking or even not making them. What are you doing?
You know, we decided, the Russian parliament particularly adopted a new law which allows to have the general meetings of shareholders to postpone it till September. I think we will use this opportunity. We didn't change any decisions on dividends, but we would like probably to see more development, how the things develop before September, in order to make the final decision on dividends. At the moment, we didn't change our decision for 50% payment, but of course the situation can change, and actually Russian central bank advised the banks not to pay dividends now and to wait and see, and if necessary not to pay dividends for 2019.
Okay, in terms of Russian oil companies as well, Andrei, so obviously we've all been watching the oil price and the volatility and the fact that WTI went negative recently. Given those moves in the oil price, will Russian oil companies be able to service their debts, or will you have to restructure them?
We didn't have any approaches from the largest operators. We do have from the small operators on restructuring their debt. And of course we'll be doing it. For banks, it's not so important to restructure the debt. It's important, whether the interests are paid. And, for example, some of the government program, they envisages that there will be zero payment for, let's say, for the holiday for 6 months. And that, of course, affects our financial results. So I think we're quite ready. We know, again, we're quite experienced because we lived through, I personally lived through at least 3 crises, and I know that big companies, oil companies, they will survive, and sooner or later they will repay the debt. So for us, that's not a very big threat to restructure, and of course we'll be doing it. But as I'm saying, again, up till now, we didn't been approached by the largest company like Rosneft or Lukoil for restructure their debt.
All right, Andrei, thank you so much for being with us. Andrei Kostin there, who is the CEO of the Russian lender VTB Bank, joining us live on the line with some interesting lines about what the Russians are doing on that. How are the markets looking at the moment, Nara?
We're seeing the Stock 600 up slightly, up just a quarter of a percentage point, Roger. So some muted risk on. US futures coming off their highs, but still up 0.9%. This is Bloomberg.
Who's in your corner?
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve. Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin as well. Matt Miller here. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Well, you must have had a very busy morning, Matt, I know. Basically, banks... It's been
awesome, though.
Yes, preparing for this deluge of bad debts, bad loans, potentially. They're putting aside huge amounts of cash. Standard Chartered, $956 million against potential losses. But actually, Standard Chartered's share price up by 4.6% this morning. And I also note that Barclays shares and a number of the other European banks that reported today have seen big jumps in their share prices. So Barclays up by more than 5%, trading offsetting the plunge in profit. So, an interesting morning.
Yeah, Deutsche Bank shares trading higher as well, even though revenue fell. Really trading jumped, obviously, because of the volatility that we're seeing. And the provisions for bad loans, well, you said Deutsche Bank, just over 500 million euros, I think, maybe not as bad as had been expected, and the bank still is on target for cost cuts and thinks it's going to be able to keep its capital ratio in order, with the exception of a little bit of a temporary drop. In any case, let's take a look at the rest of the markets this morning, Carolyn. We had kind of a mixed open, and now we've got some pretty, fairly solid gains. Certainly in London, the FTSE is up 0.9%, more than 50 points right now to 6,010. The CAC 40 is only up 0.2%, and the DAX is only up 0.33%. But the IBEX in Spain and the FTSE MIB in Milan, Italy, both up 0.6%, 0.7%, 0.8%. So you're seeing some decent gains around the periph as well as in the UK.
Yeah, FTSE 100 actually poised to go into a bull market, so that would be up. We're up more than 20% since the March low. So let's see if that 0.9% gain sticks. The other interesting one, of course, in the bond market is around Italian BTPs ahead of the ECB meeting tomorrow. 1.78%. We gained 6 basis points for Italian BTP. So there's this anticipation, perhaps, that the ECB will step in and backstop again, even though Fitch Ratings downgraded the nation's credit rating by a notch to BBB-. So that's a big one. As for the euro this morning, we traded 1.0871. So also stronger, almost 0.5%, as the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index weakens 0.3%, Matt. And just lastly, the oil markets, very strong performance today, even though we've seen the last 2 days oil prices absolutely hammered. WTI crude futures on the June contract gained 13%, $13.94, $21 this morning for Brent crude futures again on the June contract.
Wow, a 13% gain in West Texas Intermediate puts it up to just $13. Unbelievable. All right, let's, with that in mind, let's get out to our guest right now. Bob Parker joins us from Quilvest Wealth Management, also King's College, a governor at King's College. Bob, let me ask you what you take from the slew of earnings that we've had out today. I mean, clearly the markets expect this quarter, the first quarter, to be rough and the second quarter to be the worst ever. But how much are investors paying attention to the now data, and how much are they looking forward to a recovery?
I think the first answer to your question is that if you look at investor behavior since really the third week of March, there has been a slow, and I emphasize the word slow, move back into global equity markets. And obviously there has been this major disconnect between the performance of global equity markets, which really since the sort of 20th through the 23rd of March has been very strong, and the economic data and the corporate earnings numbers that we're now seeing announced. You talked about the banks and the oil sector. Obviously, oil is coming off its extreme lows. Having said that, I think in May and June, probably any rally in oil is going to be fairly limited. I think we're going to have to wait for the second half of the year before we see a more sustained improvement in oil, and that, therefore, second quarter results from the energy sector, I think, are going to be poor. And one thing to watch out for is obviously default rates in the American shale industry, and that those are clearly going to rise. On the banking sector, trading results have been very strong. We saw that from the American banks, and now we're seeing it from the European banks. Having said that, the banks are being extremely cautious and making provisions for delinquencies and defaults. I think a high degree of forecasting error comes with these provisions, and the banks themselves, I think, are being very cautious, very prudent. And if we do get, as I expect, the US and the European economies forming a base in late May and June, with a third quarter improvement in the global economy, we may see some of those provisions not being required. So the banking sector is very cheap. For example, Eurozone price earnings ratio for the banking sector is it's less than 8, so it's the cheapest sector in the market. And we could see investors move back into banks progressively in the second quarter.
Okay, that's interesting. What about the other earnings? It looks to me like airlines, car makers, and anyone dependent on advertising is also facing a huge challenge. We had Alphabet earnings out, for example, but you have talked about how tech is clearly a bet for you and something important. I've heard that from a lot of investors. So the competition is tight for investments in tech.
The answer to that is we've got extreme divergence between sectors in earnings, not just in the first quarter, but I think this divergence continues into the second quarter. You mentioned the airline and aircraft industry clearly under significant pressure. I'm told that footfall in most European airports over the last week is down about 90% relative to footfall in February. So, a major hit to that sector. If you look at consumer discretionary, whether it's luxury goods or non-staples, clearly, major fall in revenues there. Conversely, the sectors which are actually fairly immune to this economic downturn, the severe shock to the global economy, IT, telecommunications, healthcare, consumer staples, and the pharmaceutical sectors. And there, I think, we will see reasonably good corporate earnings results, in contrast to the areas which are being hit by this demand shock that the global economy is currently experiencing. And regrettably, most economic data in May for both Europe and the United States and Japan is going to be exceptionally weak.
Bob, are you worried about real estate, specifically corporate real estate? I mean, it strikes me that after we come back from this thing, a lot of companies, especially smaller, medium-sized companies, are going to say, hang on a second, why am I renting out for X $1,000 space at WeWork? Or in Regent Street or whatever, when all of my workers are doing fine from home?
I think that's a very important theme, and if you look specifically at the retails, at the real estate sector, there are two areas which I think will be damaged for the long term, and where any recovery, I think, will be very limited indeed. And the first sector is obviously retail, and if you look at the data on internet shopping, it's risen dramatically in the last month, and I don't think that's actually going to reverse. So I think that sector, retail, whether it's the leisure industry linked to real estate, that's going to be under pressure. And then obviously office space. And I think the trend of working at home obviously is going to reverse slightly, but it's not going to go, we're not all going to run back to working in our offices. So I think commercial real estate, there are winners and losers. Winners obviously are warehouses, losers are offices.
Yeah, perhaps we'll become a little bit more like Sweden, where about half of the working population often work from home. Bob Parker, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Bob Parker, Investment Committee member at Quilvest Wealth Management, also Senior Advisor to the International Capital Market Association too. So we'll give you all of your titles this morning.
A man with many hats. Thanks so much, Bob. Great to have you. Let's get over now to Leanne Gerrans for your world and national news. Leanne?
Matt, good morning and thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson's top aide pressed scientists to back a lockdown. Sources tell us Dominic Cummings was more than a bystander at a meeting of scientific experts, swaying discussion towards a faster action. Number 10 denies that political advisors influence the committee of experts, saying it's appropriate for aides to sit in on meetings and ask questions. Now let's cross over to Europe, and France plans to begin reopening shops on the 11th of May, while in Spain, the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, says most restrictions on daily life will be removed. That's over the next 8 weeks. But Germany is facing the possibility it may have to bring back tighter lockdown restrictions because the infection rate started to rise again. The country's been reopening schools and shops. German MEP and medical doctor Peter Lies says the government shouldn't lift too much too soon.
Most of the parts of Germany are starting to allow churches to open under strict restrictions, and I think this is responsible. But if you go to pubs, I think it is much more dangerous. We need to be much more careful when alcohol is around.
Now, in the US, coronavirus cases have passed the 1 million mark. Deaths have risen above 58,000. That's now more American lives lost than during the Vietnam War. And in a move criticized by labor unions, President Donald Trump is telling meat processing plants to stay open. He signed the executive order saying closures threatened food supply chains. And Singapore is in the process of scaling up its medical facilities by adding capacity at isolation wards and intensive care units. This comes as a confirmed number of virus cases nears 15,000, making it Asia's most infected country after China and India. Bloomberg's Philip Hymans reports.
More than 18,000 beds have been created for isolation and medical care needs. Another 23,000 are in the pipeline. Singapore, which reported 528 cases on Tuesday, is grappling with a rise in the number of infections among migrant workers, often living in cramped dormitories after initially being lauded for its response in the early months. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with the world news. Yes, the lockdown in the UK likely not to be lifted until at least the end of May. That's the earliest signal. Right, let's bring you a bit of the sports news now, starting with France's football prospects. Here's Joe Wilson.
Ligue 1 has become the second major European football league to be cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's after France's Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced that no sporting events, even those behind closed doors, could take place in the country before September. The French top flight follows the Dutch Eredivisie in ending their season early due to COVID-19 restrictions. The Rugby Union Premiership hopes to restart the season at the beginning of July. The RFU has been in discussions with the government about plans plans to play games behind closed doors at 1 or 2 venues in biosecure environments. And the 100th inaugural season is set to be formally delayed as a board meeting of the England and Wales Cricket Board later. All cricket in England has been suspended until at least the 1st of July due to the coronavirus pandemic.
So there's your sport news, or what there is of sport news these days. We're going to come back and talk about something that there's going to be a lot more of, and that's airline bailouts. Air France, KLM, and Lufthansa could end up with 20 billion euros of taxpayer cash. But how much control would they lose to the government? That's the big question for management. We'll talk about it with Chris Bryant on the other side of this break. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Witham offers private equity expertise to address the advisory, audit, and tax needs of your fund's portfolio companies.
Hi, I'm Bill Hageman, Witham's proud CEO. Witham's private equity specialists understand the unique challenges facing PE firms. We work hand in hand with sponsors and their portfolio companies to help maximize the value of their investments with our world-class advisory, audit, and tax solutions, and industry expertise in key growth sectors such as healthcare, manufacturing, and real estate.
Visit witham.com/PE for more information.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Tom McKenzie.
BNP Paribas China CEO CG Lai. Thank you for joining us. What is your assessment of China's economy at this point, and how is this impacting your business?
We are actually surprised by the speed of the recovery. I think in the early stage of the virus, everybody was kind of expecting that China will not be able to go through a very V shape. So everybody was more or less pricing in a U shape of recovery, and a lot of people were suspecting that. If you look at the first quarter, it was minus 6.8%. But since the month of March, we see a very good recovery. Actually, we see very good recovery. So for the second quarter, we see we were going back to the positive, and the recovery in China will be more like a Nike V shape. Okay, but that was more because in the subsequent virus in China, we see the virus attack all the rest of the world. So the recovery might be slower for the rest of the world, but we still think at this moment of time we are quite optimistic because it does appear it's better than what we thought originally. It does not impact our business in a great way because the recovery and the speed of the recovery seems to be very fast.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. U.S. futures are in the green this morning. S&P 500 futures up nearly 0.8%. NASDAQ futures up more than 1%. Could be as we had Alphabet shares surge after their results yesterday. They had cloud and YouTube still growing those businesses even during the pandemic. In Europe, the benchmark index is flat. Investors are really digesting a number of measures. Governments looking to reopen economies. We also have the Fed decision later today. The ECB tomorrow, all on top of a massive earnings season. If you have yet to write that off due to this cycle due to the pandemic. In the bond market today, it's really all about Italian and those BTPs, Italian sovereign bonds retreating, the yield jumping 6.6 basis points right now. At one point, it jumped as much as 10 basis points. This comes as Fitch downgraded the nation's rating to just one level above junk. And in foreign exchange today, we are seeing a lot of selling of the dollar. Asia FX currency traders are saying they're seeing a lot of these orders. So you do have a stronger euro, 108 against the U.S. dollar, a stronger yen as well against the dollar, and stronger British pound, 1 spot 24. And in the oil market, we are seeing some stabilization. WTI crude nearly at $14 a barrel this morning. Keep an eye on the data at 10:30 a.m. ET. Those are the U.S. stockpiles data. Everyone is waiting for that. And then Brent crude this morning, $21 a barrel. But keep in mind, we could potentially see some volatility. That June contract for Brent expires tomorrow. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. Now let's start here in the UK. There is a sign that current restrictions are likely to continue until at least the second half of May. The government sees a test, a track and trace system as a way to ensure coronavirus infections don't take off once the lockdown is lifted. But the contact tracing app is about 3 weeks from being released. Now, in Russia, President Vladimir Putin is ordering citizens to stay under lockdown until the 11th of May after the total number of coronavirus cases in the country surpassed China's. Putin said the restrictions in place for a month have slowed the pandemic, but he warned the improving weather and upcoming holiday weekends may test his people's resolve. And finally, over in the US, Vice President Mike Pence is under fire for disregarding virus policy on face masks when visiting a top clinic. The Centers for Disease Control recommends masks in public, and Pence himself has reportedly urged Americans to follow that guidance. However, he was the only person without a mask at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. He says he's regularly tested and does not have the coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We are joined today by opinion columnist Chris Bryant, who's writing about the struggles facing the airline industry and the government bailouts that they're pursuing and or trying to avoid. Right, Chris? Because some companies, seems like Lufthansa wants to figure out a way not to deal with a government bailout.
Right. Good morning, Matt. Yeah, Lufthansa currently in large ditch talks with the German government about the shape of its bailout. The gist of our reporting is essentially they're unhappy with the terms of that are being offered to them. I think the German government is pushing for some board seats there, and Lufthansa concerned about undue pressure on its strategy going forward. Frankly, in my opinion, I don't think they're in much of a position to argue. They've got only about $4 billion of cash and facilities left, and they're burning through that at a rapid clip as customers demand their money back for cancelled trips. So they need help, and I think ultimately they're probably going to get it. And as we've seen as well, Air France last week getting a $7 billion bailout from Paris. And the tone of my column is essentially, if you're from a big country with the fiscal room to do these kind of bailouts, that's great for you right now. Not so good if you're from the UK, Ireland, or Spain, where either the governments don't want to or can't necessarily afford to bail out these companies.
Although you've pointed out that IAG isn't asking for the cash, but you're right, the government sort of more reluctant here. It still does leave, though, countries across Europe picking and choosing winners and losers in this.
It does, and it's not supposed to be that way. I mean, obviously, the European Union places a lot of store by having a competitive market, and state aid controls are pretty tight. But what they've done in recent weeks, obviously under the exceptional circumstances, relax state aid rules to allow governments to help their companies. On that ideal world, everybody would get help from their own governments, and there wouldn't be any sort of competitive threat. But my fear is, because, as I say, some governments do seem to be more willing to help than others, then essentially this will sort of alter the terms of competition. And I mean, to be clear, Lufthansa and Air France, when they come out of this crisis, are not going to be in very good shape. I mean, Air France was already, very heavily indebted. Now it's borrowing even more, and it has to pay that money back. Nevertheless, it's obviously better to get a bailout and to get extra loans than not to be able to have them at all. And as you saw yesterday, IAG taking drastic action at the British Airways, now announcing 12,000 job cuts.
Now, most importantly, Chris, as a 6'4", 210-pound newscaster who's been tortured by airlines for decades, when the governments eventually take these companies over, and because we're worried about social distancing, are we finally going to get regular seats back in these planes?
Well, that's a very important discussion. I mean, I know you're slightly joking, but in a sense, it is a crucial question. That, for example, will the middle seat of the airline be filled or not? Mr. O'Leary, in between making comments about the shape of bailouts, is also very opposed to the idea that this middle seat should be left empty. He says it's basically useless in terms of preserving your health, because you'll still have somebody sat in front and behind. But of course, leaving that seat empty would affect the economics of running budget flights in Europe, where they really try and fill up the plane. So as to how we get people flying again, make them comfortable with doing that, whilst creating some kind of profit margin for the airline, is a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, let's see when tourism and business travel actually starts up again. Thank you so much for joining us. Bloomberg opinion columnist Chris Bryant there, writing about the subsidies, state aid for the airline industry. Coming up next, though, we've got another great interview for you from the Barclays CEO, Jess Staley, talking about their quarterly results. That interview coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We're live from London and Berlin this morning.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The head of Tokyo's 2020 Olympic Organizing Committee says the Games would be canceled instead of being further postponed if the coronavirus pandemic isn't under control by 2021. Yoshiro Mori told Nikkan Sports that a delay to 2022 wouldn't happen, noting that during wars, the Games have simply been canceled. Mori says if we can hold the Olympics after the world beats the virus, the Games will have many times more value than in the past. The Los Angeles Lakers received a loan of about $4.6 million under the stimulus package Congress passed in March. However, the NBA team says it returned the money to the federal government. A Pennsylvania appeals court has ruled that Villanova University's plan to construct a 65-foot removable dome for its soccer field can't proceed because the structure would violate zoning laws. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
25 years ago, NJI... I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good
good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel-good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated, and it's easier than ever for people to make an honest mistake and lose their money. TSB doesn't think anyone should have to pay for being an innocent victim of fraud on their account. That's why they've created the TSB Fraud Refund Guarantee. To find out more, visit tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
Very good morning. I'm Caroline Hebke here in London. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
It was difficult to get out. There's so much going on today. Yeah. You know, I came in, around 5 o'clock this morning to interview the CFO of Deutsche Bank, James von Moltke. Then we had Jess Staley on our program. We talked with the famed economist Thomas Piketty. I mean, it's really been a blockbuster day. Plus, you had earnings from some of the companies I'm most interested in, personally, Daimler, Volkswagen. Ford Motor Company in the U.S. warned of a $5 billion loss in the second quarter. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this morning on radio, we spoke to the Swedish health minister, who was really fascinating because they've taken a slightly different route, looser restrictions in terms of people's movement. Basically, shops are open there, and some pupils still going to school, young ones, for example.
I had a weird conversation with her as well.
Yeah,
why did you wait to take this seriously?
Yeah.
She said, we didn't wait.
Yeah,
I said, oh, so you didn't leave your stores open, your restaurants open, you didn't leave your schools open? She's like, well, we did that, yeah.
And she wasn't changing course either, and also sort of refused to take the comparison between countries. Anyway, loads of interesting conversations. Briefly,
you know what they need in Sweden? Dominic Cummings.
Ugh, ouch.
You wonder how many thousands of lives he could have saved there, right? Because isn't he the one who basically forced the Scientific Council in Britain to shut down the economy earlier than they wanted to?
Yes, this is the so-called SAGE group. So Britain's talked about relying on the science and so on. Well, the group that does that is called SAGE here. And normally you have kind of politicians or political advisors just sitting in. But actually it's been quite controversial, the fact that perhaps he influenced this scientific group. Anyway, great piece on
But isn't it lucky that he did?
Yes, it is. If true, it is absolutely.
Because I feel like I hear the English press. On the one hand, they're angry that the lockdown didn't happen sooner, that the government didn't respond more forcefully. On the other hand, they're angry that Dominic Cummings urged the Sage Council to lock down the economy sooner.
I suppose it's about responsibility. Who holds responsibility for what, and the clarity that the government gives, when it makes decisions, I suppose. But anyway, that is the debate in the UK. Meanwhile, of course, let's have a look at the markets, because actually the FTSE's been doing pretty well this morning. The outlier up 0.7% this morning, whereas the US Stock 600 is flat. So actually we may be going into a bull market if we end up today on the FTSE 100. So that would be up 20% since the March lows.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the Barclays interview. I was talking about Anna Edwards, and I spoke with the CEO, Jess Staley, about credit losses and how the bank is coping with the strains of the pandemic.
Well, first let me say that, what we saw in the first quarter is something that we've talked about for the last 4 years, which is the diversification benefit of a universal banking model. For sure, the corporate investment bank had a strong first quarter led by the markets business and the investment bank. But, the consumer bank had both the U.S. and the U.K. Had its challenges because of the pandemic and what we're seeing in the economy. I think in the markets business, we have stayed invested over the last 4 years across all the asset classes. I think we stayed very engaged with our clients. The performance was very much driven by the volume of securities that we were trading with our clients. It was not based on any particular position or direction that we had going into it. So we feel very comfortable about it. And as we've also said in our press release, the beginning parts of April were also much higher than what we saw in the second quarter of last year. So we feel very good about the number. It's a lot of dedication of people in that business, and it allowed us to weather a significant impairment reserve that we took in the first quarter, and still generate a 5% ROTE. And it was good to see the CIB in a double-digit level of profitability.
So that's the CIB part of the story. On the rest of the business, the level of provisions that you're taking, or that you've had to take in the last quarter, Jez, what kind of visibility do you have as to the trajectory of those provisions against credit losses that you'll have to make, I assume, once again into the second quarter?
What we did was, so our provision overall for impairment in the first quarter was £2.1 billion. Of that, £1.4 billion was basically what we think might happen to our consumer and corporate credit business if we had a very difficult economic scenario play out for the rest of the year. So we take forecasts around unemployment. For instance, the unemployment forecast we use for the U.S. was 17%. We take a GDP reduction, which was quite severe in the forecast for the second and third quarter. And you run those forecasts through your credit models, and the models punch out a £1.4 billion reserve. So if the economy is that tough and unemployment goes that high, we've reserved for what we anticipate the credit losses to be. If, because of the government response, which is so robust around the world, starts to mitigate the contraction in the economy, then that will free up reserves later on. So we think we have been prudent, but it shows, given the inherent profitability of the bank, that we can take a reserve like that and still make some £600 million of after-tax profit.
Jess, I think a lot of people are focused on, concerned about the health of SMEs, consumers, and small and medium-sized enterprises. What kind of demand are you seeing from loans from SMEs? And I suppose you've got to throw in your big credit card business there as well, because obviously a lot of small businesses bootstrap their expenses with credit cards. And how helpful have government programs been in helping you to meet that demand?
Yeah, I think the thing that we're really living with is the strain and stress that's being put on the consumer and the small businesses and the self-employed, it really is difficult to watch. So we're doing things like, we have given payment holidays to some 238,000 consumer and small business clients of the bank to try to ease that pain. But what we're seeing in terms of demand for credit actually is less, because people are they've stopped spending and they are trying to preserve cash and hold on for a recovery. So actually the demand on our credit at the small level is not what you would expect it to be, but we've kept all of our lines open. We are extending credit where they want to. But what has started to work is the incredible programs by the government, and for us it's here in the UK. Extending low-interest, long-term credit is beginning to work, transmitted through the banks, where in the case of what's called the civil program, we take our skin in the game is about 20%. We've done some 3,700 mortgages or loans through that program like that, about £737 million to small businesses in the UK. So the governments, I think, are putting a lot at it. I think it's just begun, but we all need to preserve our financial integrity, because these companies are going to need help when the economy opens up and they can start to hopefully bring furloughed employees back in and start their shops and their stores and their restaurants. And we're all going to need to do our part to get that part of the economy re-engaged, or this will be a really tragic economic crisis.
And that was the CEO of Barclays, Jess Staley.
Okay, let's get all the latest now in terms of global news headlines and all the news on coronavirus. Good morning, Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans is here.
Caroline, good morning and thank you. We're going to start here in the UK, where the government is starting to plot a gradual course out of its coronavirus lockdown. The key to the strategy is mass testing and tracking, and the country's not likely to have the tools it needs until at least mid-May. Now, Bloomberg's Charles Capel has all those details.
On Tuesday, it expanded access to virus tests to all care home residents and staff, and some elderly people and workers with symptoms. It has also been rapidly increasing its capacity, delivering home tests and deploying army-operated mobile testing sites. The UK has been chasing Germany's lead in mass testing, a strategy that kept its fatalities relatively low. On Tuesday, the UK passed Germany to become the country with the 5th most confirmed coronavirus cases in the world. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Europe, Spain is preparing for a new normal as Europe's hardest hit nation removes restrictions over the next 8 weeks. Meanwhile, France plans to reopen shops and schools from the 11th of May with a lot of restrictions, but only if the coronavirus spread is contained by then. Now, coronavirus cases in the US pass the 1 million mark and deaths topped 58,000, double the toll in Italy. That's now more American lives lost than during the Vietnam War. And in a move criticised by labor unions, President Donald Trump is telling meat processing plants to stay open. He signed the executive order saying closures threaten food supplies. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over. Then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
GEP, AI-powered cloud-native digital transformation. Hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies work with GEP to transform their procurement and supply chain operations. Why? GEP's unified digital platforms, smart, intuitive software that business users love, drive up adoption, user satisfaction, and productivity. GEP helps CIOs drive real digital transformation and achieve amazing results. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine the garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be vigilant for suspicious calls that appear to be from your bank, the police, or the government. Remember, neither Santander, the police, or any other organisation will ask you to move or withdraw money for security reasons.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
This is a quick message from QuickFit. That sound probably sums up how you're feeling about things right now. But QuickFit won't let it slow you down. If you have an essential journey to make, but your car needs new tyres, don't worry. QuickFit's mobile fitting service will come to you. Keeping you safe on the road has never been more important. Visit quickfit.com to choose your tyres and book your slot. QuickFit, still there when you need them.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York City. I'm Amber Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. This morning in Europe, the Stock 600 benchmark index is flat. We are seeing oil and gas companies lead the sector higher, up 2 4/10% on that index. Healthcare, retail are all lower this morning. Potentially we could see oil and gas stocks doing better because in the oil market we have some stabilization. WTI crude trading above $14 a barrel. U.S. stockpile data out at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Take a look at that. That's one everyone's going to be watching. Brent crude, $21.27. Still, potential pressure on Brent as that contract for June expires tomorrow. U.S. futures are pointing higher. The NASDAQ 100 mini futures up more than 1%. Alphabet shares were surging after their earnings results. They said cloud and YouTube, those businesses still growing during the pandemic. And then in the bond market today, it's all about Italy and those BTPs. Right now, yields are up 9.1%. At one point, they jumped as much as 10 basis points. This is after Fitch downgraded the nation's rating to just one level above junk. And in foreign exchange today, FX traders over in Asia say that everyone is just selling the dollar. They're seeing a lot of those orders. So the euro dollar is stronger today, 108. We have the yen stronger against the dollar and the pound as well, 1.24. One thing to keep in mind this week, investors will be digesting a lot of news. We have the Fed today, the ECB tomorrow, all while we have a flood of earnings. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Now, let's start here in the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's top aide pressed scientists to back a lockdown. Sources tell us Dominic Cummings was more than a bystander at a meeting of scientific experts, swaying discussion towards a faster action. Number 10 denies that political advisors influenced the committee of experts, saying it's appropriate for aides to sit in on the meetings and ask questions. Now, Europe took another step towards a life after lockdown. France plans to begin reopening shops on May the 11th, while Spain is preparing for a new normal as Europe's hardest hit nation removes restrictions over the next 8 weeks. Meanwhile, Germany reported that the number of new cases increased for the first time in 3 days. And finally, streamed films will be eligible for next year's Oscars because the pandemic has forced cinemas to shut. It means movies will be considered for the awards in 2021, even if they made their debut streaming or on demand platforms. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTech by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thank you very much for that. Now, let's get over to Nathan Hager in the U.S. He's preparing for Bloomberg Daybreak, which is coming up if you're listening on Sirius XM. Nathan, what do you got planned?
Well, Matt, good morning. We've reached a tough milestone here in the U.S., 1 million confirmed coronavirus cases and counting. But we are also seeing signs we may be turning the corner on COVID-19. The nation's top infectious disease expert is sounding cautiously optimistic about prospects for a vaccine. But as the outbreak goes on, President Trump is now taking action to protect the food supply chain through an executive order. We're going to have all those details coming up on the show. We are also awaiting a key policy decision from the Federal Reserve. This could be one to watch after the extraordinary moves the central bank has been making during this pandemic. We're going to ask Wells Fargo senior economist Mark Vittner what he'll be listening for from Chairman Powell today. And we have full analysis of U.S. tech and European bank earnings this morning. And we will check in with Johns Hopkins immunologist Dr. Andy Pekos to get his take on whether we're getting an accurate count of the toll COVID-19 has taken around the world. All that, much more coming up with me and Karen Moscow on Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt?
Very cool. Looking forward to it. Nathan, thanks so much. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow coming up if you're listening on Sirius XM. If you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix. And
Yes.
Caroline.
Yes, I'm still here, poised.
And our next guest.
Yes,
He will also be going, but we're going to give you a sneak preview of Surveillance's keynote guest.
Absolutely. Stephen Major, Global Head of Fixed Income Research at HSBC, who's with us this morning, just before he goes on to TV. And I wanted to start, Stephen, actually with Italian sovereign bonds falling in the wake of the credit rating downgrade of the country that is obviously perhaps the worst hit by coronavirus in Europe. Fitch downgraded it by a notch yesterday. But this perhaps less of a concern because of the backing of the ECB. Surely there is worse to come, but the ECB will perhaps be pressured to do more.
Yeah, I saw the Fitch downgrade, but also I was thinking how S&P and Moody's had not changed anything.
Yeah.
And furthermore, prior to that, there was nothing from DBRS either. So there's more than enough credit support. You can be as cynical as you like about these rating agencies. I mean, I'll leave it for others to do.
Reminds me of the financial crisis. You know, that was when S&P and Moody's thought everything was investment grade as well, and Fitch was the only one that came out and said it's all junk.
That's right. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, because that saves me doing it. And I don't want to get into trouble, so if they're listening, they can give you a call. So I don't know whether there's any right or wrong in their methodologies, because it depends on your assumptions, doesn't it? So the interesting thing about the Moody's and S&P stuff is that they have acknowledged how bad things are, and even when they make projections into 21 and 22, they're not that good. So with bad projections that are not exactly V-shape, they still didn't downgrade. So with Fitch, maybe they're being more rigorous. That one could suggest that. The thing is with Italy is that it doesn't really matter if the ECB is taking down the flow, which is what they're doing, and they could. The question is the flow.
And surely they will have to do more of that, I guess, is the question. And also Christine Lagarde will no doubt be questioned on this in the press conference tomorrow. So she's going to have to give some kind of answer.
It's not her job to keep spreads in check.
Well, she said she did say that, because that was another trap from Matt. So she's not going to make that mistake again, is she? She's not going to say that again. This is one thing we can be confident about. She's not going to make the mistake of saying anything on spreads. And look, the ECB has to fill into the gap left by the disappointing fiscal response. I mean, it's all a bit. We've seen it all before. So the thing with the ECB is that they tend to be ahead of the governments, and this, for me, is the key point. The mutualization of sovereign debt across the Eurozone is happening. It's under the table. The bigger the ECB's balance sheet, the more the debt is being mutualized. Now, people argue about this point. They say that, in fact, everyone to their own. Each sovereign is responsible for its own bonds. There is a several liability, which is each into its own, of about 90% of the ECB's balance sheet, which is just 10% joint and several. But you've got to think about how this is financed. Balance sheet is $6.5 trillion, trillion euros, and over time, this gets spread around the Eurozone because it's funded by the creation of reserves in the banking system. I just think that's being missed. So if you were a creditor nation, let's say Germany or Holland, you've got a choice. You either sit down and you organise this in a civilised manner, or you have it done for you. And that's what the ECB is doing. I mean, each year that goes by, there's a creeping mutualisation.
And by the way,
that's the big thing.
We had Stephen, Thomas Piketty was on our television program earlier, and he said he thought it was a great idea for Spain to issue a perpetual bond worth 10% of GDP and then have the ECB just buy it all.
Matt, there's a precedent. You can go on your Bloomberg and you can find the FOB. Do you remember that? That was a bond issued about 90 billion euros in the last crisis a decade ago. And it wasn't free to trade for you and me. It was a bond created and bought by the ECB.
to fund the banks. There you go. You just create a ticker on Bloomberg. You shade it in so it has a different colour, right? So when you click on it, you can't actually go for all Q and trade it because it doesn't trade. It's just been created. And against that asset, which sits on the central bank balance sheet as an asset at the ECB, they create a liability which will be reserves, right? And they flow into the banking system. I mean, it sounds like dodgy accounting, doesn't it? Well, it isn't. It's how it works. So that is completely feasible, that suggestion.
But how likely?
Well, it's someone came up with Corona bonds as an idea. That's sort of been kicked into the long grass, a bit like Euro bonds. I mean, there's people that have allergic reactions to these kind of things, right? I don't know what it is.
German.
But, there's people that don't like it. We have to respect everyone, right? We have to respect all the different opinions. And that's just how it goes. Yeah. So to me, it's about the labelling and the way you do it. But there's nothing to stop a country like Spain going that way. They've done it before. It was for the banking system. It was for the risks of a financial crisis. So this is a pandemic. It's a real economic crisis. It could be a financial crisis. It seems to be a good candidate.
I will tell you can watch back our Thomas Piketty interview on Bloomberg.com. And I will tell our listeners, you can hear more from Stephen Major coming up next on Bloomberg Surveillance if you're tuned in on London DAB Digital Radio. If you're listening on Sirius XM, good morning.
Investors who put their money on the line.
Oh. Just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of people you've met online who claim to be stranded abroad and urgently need money. Always take time to think before you act, and if you think you're the victim of fraud, then let your bank know right away.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from, we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking,
which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. coronavirus cases passed 1 million as the pandemic claims more lives than the Vietnam War.
Prospects for a vaccine are looking up, according to the nation's leading infectious disease expert.
President Trump takes action to prevent a meat shortage as more processing plants close their doors.
COVID-19 numbers on the decline in New York, plus President Trump ties virus aid for states to policy on sanctuary cities. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. There's a new report on how baseball will return. 3 10-team divisions, games only within the division and played at home stadium.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And U.S. futures are gaining this morning. 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 27 points. Dow futures up 189. NASDAQ futures up 100. The DAX in Germany is up 0.3%. CAC in Paris, little change. FTSE 100 up 0.8%. No trading in Japan today, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up 0.3%. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.60%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is up about 15%, up $1.81 to $14.14 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.25% or $4.70 at $17.1740 an ounce. The euro 1.0868 against the dollar. The yen 106.49. Nathan.
Well, Karen, we begin with two grim milestones in the coronavirus outbreak. Cases in the U.S. have passed 1 million, and the pandemic has now claimed more lives than the Vietnam War. Still, the rate of infection is slowing. Joining us now with the latest is Bloomberg's Tom Busby. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Daily U.S. coronavirus cases rose 2.5%. That's below the past week's 3.3% rate. That spread is slowing sharply in New York State with just a 1% increase. Governor Andrew Cuomo reported another decline in daily deaths, though the rate remains high.
Every day, I think maybe today is the day the nightmare will be over, but it's not. 335 people passed away yesterday from this virus in this state.
Overall, more than 17,000 New Yorkers have succumbed to the virus. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thank you. Despite the grim news, there is hope. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's overseen the response to every outbreak since HIV, is cautiously optimistic on the prospects for a vaccine. He spoke at a virtual event hosted by the Economic Club of Washington.
Hopefully, by the time we get to this coming winter, we will know whether or not we have a safe and effective vaccine. And then the challenge will be to scale it up enough to be able to distribute it meaningfully.
There are currently more than 90 vaccine candidates in the pipeline, including efforts from Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, and GlaxoSmithKline.
Well, the latest impact from the virus has meat processing plants across the country shutting down. Now, President Trump is signing an executive order to keep them open.
And that'll solve any liability problems where they had certain liability problems, and we'll be in very good shape. We're working with Tyson, which is one of the big companies in that world.
The president will use the Defense Production Act to keep plants open as critical infrastructure. That's after Tyson Foods ran ads in national newspapers saying the food supply chain was broken.
Meantime, one of the biggest U.S. meat suppliers says the pandemic will reshape the way we eat forever. Cargill CEO Dave McLennan spoke exclusively on Leadership Live with David Rubenstein, heard weekly on Bloomberg Television.
So far, I think the industry has been able to run. We've had tremendous support from the USDA in terms of having the inspectors on site. You can't run a plant without USDA inspectors. So I think it remains to be seen of how we're going to manage that dynamic between the health and emotional safety and physical safety of the workers in the plants and the executive order of which we're still studying the details.
Cargill CEO Dave McLennan sees the pandemic resulting in a long-term shift in people eating more meals at home. So far, the restaurant industry has seen more than 8 million workers laid off. The National Restaurant Association sees the industry losing more than $80 billion in sales by the end of this month.
Well, we turn now to the earnings fallout from the outbreak. Alphabet is posting strong results despite the pandemic, with cloud and YouTube revenue jumping in the quarter. John Freeman is Vice President of Equity Research at CFRA.
Revenue growth is clearly, already decelerating for Google, but I actually don't think it's going to be that bad as the overall industry, and they're going to come out of it, a year from now even stronger than they were.
While Google's ad sales slumped in March, sales still topped estimates. That has Alphabet shares higher by 7% in early trading.
Earnings rolled in overnight for some of Europe's biggest banks. We get details on those results from Bloomberg's John Tucker, who joins us live. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. European bank earnings haven't been that bad. Deutsche Bank says money set aside for loans that people can't pay back could peak in the first half after reaching the highest level in 6 years. Now, the fixed income trading revenue advanced more than analysts had expected. The bank is also progress on efficiency. Barclays reported a surge in trading revenue, and while Standard Chartered's loan loss provisions surged to almost $1 billion, its pre-tax earnings did beat estimates. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, John, thank you. Back here in the U.S., it's a big day for economic news. We get an initial reading on first quarter growth, plus a policy decision from the Federal Reserve. Here with more is Bloomberg economics correspondent Michael McKee.
After almost 11 years, the longest expansion in U.S. history is almost certainly over. First quarter GDP forecast to have contracted for the first time since the Great Recession, the economy shut down by the coronavirus. The pandemic led the Fed to shift almost overnight from sustaining the expansion to keeping the economy from crashing further. After cutting borrowing costs to zero and creating 9 different programs to lend into the economy, policymakers aren't expected to take additional action at this meeting, but their task may not be done. The first quarter GDP drop pales against expectations for the second quarter, with the worst estimate for a 65% pace of contraction. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Michael, thank you. S&P futures up 29 points this morning. Dow futures up 208. NASDAQ futures up 106. And the 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.60%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Michael Barr has more on the coronavirus fallout and more on what's happening around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says there were 335 new deaths from the coronavirus within a 24-hour period. He's also noting the number of new COVID hospitalizations was below 1,000 for the first time in more than a month. Cuomo says, though, reopening the state must be done logically.
We want to reopen, but we want to do it without infecting more people or overwhelming the hospital system.
Cuomo also says he's going to deal with homeless people sleeping in subway cars, saying it's disrespectful to the essential workers who need to ride the subway system. Cuomo added it's not even safe for homeless people who have no face masks. The temporary hospital at the Javits Center in Manhattan will be shutting down operations by May 5th. Governor Cuomo's office also says other temporary hospitals built by FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers will also be closing soon. President Donald Trump indicated he wouldn't allow federal aid for states facing budget deficits from the coronavirus outbreak unless they take action against sanctuary cities. President Trump has long complained about the cities and has previously sought to cut off their federal funding unless they end the policies. California may start the school year in the summer. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Governor Gavin Newsom says he's worried about the loss of our kids' learning time.
And so we are considering the prospect of an even earlier school year into the fall. As early as late July, early August.
He says as long as numbers of cases continue to go down, he says reopening too soon could be very dangerous, though. But the possibility of late July or early August does exist. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
A vaccine to halt the coronavirus pandemic could be available as early as this year for vulnerable groups such as healthcare workers. That's according to the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Hillary Clinton says she's endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden for president. Clinton says he has the experience and leadership qualities for the job.
Think of what it would mean if we had a real president, not just somebody who plays one on TV.
Clinton served with Biden in the Senate. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, thanks, Michael. It's 5:09 on Wall Street now. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashire.
All right, good morning, Nathan. Every day seems to bring a new report on baseball's plans for its return. The latest comes from USA Today that 30 teams will split into 3 10-team divisions based on geography. So the Mets and Yankees would be with the likes of the Red Sox, Orioles, Nationals, and Phillies, and however many games they can squeeze in would all be against teams within the division. The other big wrinkle is that they would play in their home stadiums, albeit without fans. This might be a way to appease the Players Association since there was pushback to the idea of playing all the games in Phoenix. Yankee manager Aaron Boone wants to get back to work.
It seems like as more time goes off the clock and as, every day, obviously, hopefully is bringing more information, more opportunity. It does seem like maybe more plans are becoming feasible. So we just have to see how the next days and weeks play out. And hopefully we can have, as Kirshen said, the best of those bad plans. But I think a lot of us, and I know a lot of sports fans would love to see some way, shape, or form us back and performing, and I can't wait.
Boone came on ESPN last night after the showing of what's known as the Aaron Boone game, the home run he hit to win the 2003 pennant. The Orioles' Trey Mancini, who 35 homers last season, says no matter what the season looks like, he won't play. Mancini recovering from stage 3 colon cancer. Harlan Savari died at 89, a linebacker for the Giants when they won the 1956 NFL championship. And then when Tom Landry left the Giants to go coach the Cowboys, Savari replaced him as defensive coordinator while he was still an active player. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, it wasn't the real thing, but it'll have to do for tennis fans. We have results from the virtual Madrid Open, the first video game tournament of the pandemic involving professional tennis players, and it was no contest as Andy Murray easily defeated Rafael Nadal 3-0. In fact, Nadal only won a single point, which took less than 10 minutes to play. Too bad those controllers aren't made out of clay. Future's moving higher. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Well, most of us are looking out for each other at this time. Sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments. I'll fight you. Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone DreamLab and join the Dream Team tonight.
DreamLab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
McKinsey. BNP Paribas China CEO CG Lai. Thank you for joining us. What is your assessment of China's economy at this point, and how is this impacting your business?
We are actually surprised by the speed of the recovery. I think in the early stage of the virus, everybody was kind of expecting that China will not be able to go through a very V shape. So everybody was more or less pricing in a U shape of recovery, and a lot of people were suspecting that. If you look at the first quarter, it was minus the 6.8%. But since the month of the March, we see a very good recovery. Actually, we see very good recovery. So for the second quarter, we see we were going back to the positive, and the recovery in China will be more like a Nike V shape, okay? But that was more because in the subsequent virus in China, we see the virus attack all the rest of the world. So the recovery might be slower for the rest of the world. But we still think at this moment of time, we are quite optimistic because it does appear it's better than what we thought originally. It does not impact our business in a great way because the recovery and the speed of the recovery seems to be very fast.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks, they've been fluctuating this morning. Asian shares gaining, along with U.S. stock index futures, as investors count down to more big earnings, a Federal Reserve policy decision, and key U.S. economic data. Oil is climbing after losing more than a quarter of its value over the past 2 days, with volatility likely to continue. On concern, prices may drop below zero again as investors and a major fund exit the June contract. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 26 points this morning. Dow futures up 183. NASDAQ futures up 95. The DAX in Germany's up 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 430 seconds. Yield 0.59%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is up 14.5%, up $1.80 at $14.14 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.1%, down $2.40 at $17.1970 an ounce. The euro 1.0865 against the dollar. British pound 1.2437. And the yen is at 106.48. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Donald Trump has ordered meat processing plants to remain open amid concerns over growing coronavirus cases and the impact on the nation's food supply. An executive order signed by the president uses the Defense Production Act to classify meat processing as critical infrastructure to keep plants open and prevent a shortage of chicken, pork, and other meat on supermarket shelves. The United Food and Commercial Workers International Union says 20 food processing and meatpacking union workers in the U.S. have died of the virus, and they say the country can't have a secure food supply unless workers are kept safe. Defense Secretary Mark Esper is directing Pentagon budget planners to defer $545 million worth of construction projects to pay for President Trump's border wall with Mexico. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. And Mark Vittner joins us now, senior economist at Wells Fargo Securities, on a very important day for U.S. economic data. Of course, Mark, we get the first quarter GDP read at 8:30 Wall Street time, the Fed policy decision at 2 p.m. Consensus on the Bloomberg terminal is a minus 4% read on first quarter GDP. What are you looking for this morning?
Well, that seems about right. We initially were looking for a smaller drop, but the really huge pullback in the healthcare sector was somewhat of a surprise. With elective surgeries being postponed and a lot of doctors' offices and dentist offices shutting down, that actually shows up in consumer spending on services, and so that's going to take us down somewhere in the 4 to 5% range in the first quarter.
What does that read tell you about the erosion we could see in the second quarter and the shape of recovery toward the end of the year?
Well, we're likely to see a much larger drop in the second quarter. Most of the first quarter saw economic growth, and then in the second half of March, we saw things collapse. And then in April, everything was pretty much shut down. So I think we're probably looking at something in the 25 to 30% range of a decline in the second quarter for real GDP. And then we'll probably see a decent-sized rebound in the third quarter. We're not looking for a true V-shaped recovery, but when you look at the percentages, you are going to see a nice bounce back, because when the restaurants go from being 85% shut down to being only 60% shut down, that's a lot of growth, and we're going to see employment rebound and GDP rebound in the third quarter, and then probably a lesser rebound in the fourth quarter. It's a little bit less certain as to what happens in the fall, because we don't know what's going to happen with the virus, but we feel fairly confident that we're going to see a rebound in economic activity in the summer.
Well, given the uncertainty toward the end of the year, how much clarity can we expect from the Federal Reserve later today as it lays out its policy decision?
Well, the Fed's been very active, very direct, and they've been right on the money. I mean, exactly where you want the Fed to be. I mean, they've restored liquidity to the financial markets and prevented what has been just this horrific healthcare crisis and economic crisis from becoming a financial crisis. And if it became a financial crisis, it would be so much harder for the economy to regain momentum. And so I think that they're likely to really just give us a little bit of a status check and make it clear that they're not finished. I mean, they are ready to act wherever they need to if another pressure point shows up and they need to find a way to restore liquidity to a market that temporarily becomes illiquid.
There's been a fair amount of debate on whether the Fed should consider negative interest rates, not the least of which from former Minneapolis Fed President Ariana Lakota. What's your view on whether the Fed should consider that?
I think that we've had a very good test case of negative interest rates in Europe, and that the negative aspects of negative interest rates are just far outweigh the positives. I think it's in a way it's a distress signal. It's sort of like flying the American flag upside down. It's a signal of distress, and I think it chokes off so much more economic activity because folks readily recognize that the economy is facing dire straits, and they ask, "Well, what does the Fed know that we don't?" And they pull back on economic activity, and businesses don't engage, and consumers don't engage in the economy in the way that they would if interest rates were in positive territory. So I don't think it's a good idea. I know that at times we've seen Treasury dip marginally in negative territory, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about policy rates in negative territory, and I just don't think it's very likely.
You got about 30 seconds left here. What are you going to be listening for from Chairman Powell at the news conference this afternoon?
Well, I'm curious as to how they're going to come about normalizing their Treasury securities and kind of getting what the size of the Fed's balance sheet is likely to be over the long run. There's still a little bit of uncertainty. We know that it's expanded quite a bit. I don't think anyone's afraid of inflation in the very near term, because we've had such a huge negative hit to demand. But aggregate supply is also taking a hit, and the global trading system is likely to be impaired going into the future. And so at some point, we're going to have to become concerned about inflation somewhere down the road. And a lot of that will depend on how much we see the Fed's balance sheet expand. What they've done so far has been absolutely necessary, though.
Thanks for this, Mark. Good talking with you this morning. Mark Vittner, senior economist at Wells Fargo Securities. First quarter GDP printout due out at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time. The Fed policy decision at 2 p.m. Lots to pay attention to. We'll have full coverage for you here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock futures point to gains at the open after a lower close for Wall Street yesterday. The broader market was down 0.5%. Tech stocks weighed on the NASDAQ, which slid 1.4% in the session. The Dow was down 32 points. An early report yesterday showed U.S. consumer confidence at its lowest in almost 6 years. The Fed wraps up a meeting today, and Chair Jay Powell can expect questions on whether it's prepared to expand the scope of some of its lending programs and provide assistance to specific industries to help soften the blow from the coronavirus fallout. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that compels slaughterhouses to remain open, setting up a showdown between the giant companies that produce America's meat and the unions and activists who want to protect workers in the pandemic. Shares of Google's parent Alphabet surged after first quarter results, and upbeat executive comments showed the company's cloud and YouTube businesses kept growing in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, video call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistance systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Well, most of us are looking out for each other at this time. Sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be vigilant for suspicious calls that appear to be from your bank, the police, or the government. Remember, neither Santander, the police, or any other organisation will ask you to move or withdraw money for security reasons.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone DreamLab and join the Dream Team tonight.
DreamLab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston. Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco. Bloomberg 960. To the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour, beginning with 2 grim milestones in the coronavirus outbreak. Cases in the U.S. have passed 1 million, and the pandemic has now claimed more lives than the Vietnam War. Still, Dr. Anthony Fauci is cautiously optimistic on the prospects for a vaccine.
There are going to be a lot of candidates out there. A few of them are already well into phase 1 studies in humans to determine if it's safe. And hopefully we can move along rather rapidly to get an answer. Are they safe and effective?
There are currently more than 90 vaccine candidates in the pipeline, including efforts from Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, and GlaxoSmithKline.
All right, let's turn now to the earnings fallout from the outbreak. Alphabet is posting strong results despite the pandemic, with cloud and YouTube revenue jumping in the quarter. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Demand for advertising was high in the months before the coronavirus pandemic. The Google parent said sales came in at $33.71 billion. The company does not issue forecasts, however. Chief Financial Officer Ruth Porat said the final month of the quarter was difficult. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. And we have analysis on those results coming up in 15 minutes. But first, we also have earnings from some of Europe's biggest banks. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. Good morning, John.
Yeah, Karen, the results actually offer some bright spots for European banks. While they're setting aside more money for bad loans due to the pandemic, Deutsche Bank's first quarter trading, that beat estimates. Barclays saw a blockbuster quarter for trading. Earnings were more than double estimates, and Standard Chartered results also beat pre-tax estimates. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. Back here in the U.S., it's a big day for economic news. We get a policy decision from the Federal Reserve, plus an initial reading on first quarter growth. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Bloomberg Economics says the central bank will signal it has ample tools at its disposal. The Fed cut its benchmark interest rate to near zero last month, pledging to stay put until it's confident the economy has weathered the pandemic. Since then, millions have lost jobs, depressing economic growth. Today's GDP report will probably show a first quarter drop of 5%, followed by a record-shattering second quarter plunge, perhaps 30 to 40%. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. S&P futures are higher, up 28 points. Dow futures up 203. NASDAQ futures up 100. The DAX in Germany is up about 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 4/32 yield 0.59%. Yield on the 2-year 0.20%. And NYMEX crude oil up 15% at $14.20 a barrel. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. The number of new COVID-19 hospitalizations in New York has fallen below 1,000 for the first time in more than a month. During his briefing yesterday, Governor Andrew Cuomo says the number of daily deaths are reducing, with 335 new deaths in a 24-hour period in the state. The governor also addressed another problem. Cuomo held up a newspaper photo of homeless people sleeping in subway cars. He says it's not even safe for homeless people who have no face masks.
That is disgusting, what is happening on those subway cars. It's disrespectful to the essential workers who need to ride the subway system. Upstate New York need to ride the buses to get to work. They deserve better, and they will have better.
Meanwhile, the temporary hospital at the Javits Center in Manhattan will be shutting down operations by May 5th. Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine says his state is starting to open up a little bit in a reasonable way that gives people confidence to patronize businesses and be safe.
This Friday, we start really opening up with our hospitals. Next week, we go into manufacturing that's not already open. And then on the 12th of May, we move to retail. We're not yet to restaurants. We're trying to plot that out.
Meanwhile, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis met with President Trump at the White House about whether to join other states moving to relax workplace restrictions and stay-at-home orders. DeSantis talked about how the airline should probably do more to check passengers on international flights.
If you have some of these international flights, maybe some of these airliners it should be on them to check before they're getting on and coming to this country so that we're able to keep it. I mean, you've seen what happened with the China flight restrictions. That kept a lot of people from seeding the West Coast more.
President Trump indicated he wouldn't allow federal aid for states facing budget deficits from the coronavirus outbreak unless they take action against municipalities that prevent their police from cooperating with immigration authorities. The president says people are being protected that shouldn't be protected, and a lot of bad things are happening with sanctuary cities. Democrat Kwesi Mfume has easily won a special election to complete the term of the late Maryland Representative Elijah Cummings. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. Just before 5:36 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John?
Nathan, the speculation continues. Not will there be a baseball season, but what will it look like? USA Today reports there's a plan now to split the 30 teams into three 10-team divisions, East, Midwest, and West. So the Mets and Yankees would be with the Red Sox, Phillies, Blue Jays, Orioles, Nationals, Pirates, Rays, and Marlins. All games would be played solely within the division, so travel would be limited, but games would be played in empty home stadiums. Reps from all the leagues had a conference call yesterday with a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, the thrust being the importance of sports' return. Tom Brady down in Tampa made a visit to the home of Bucs offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich. The NFL says that, unlike Deflategate, did not break a rule. Players and coaches are not to meet face-to-face during this time. Brady said it was a quick visit to pick up his Buccaneers playbook. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you for that. Now let's take some time to look at the earnings picture in Europe today. Results from some of the Eurozone's biggest banks are coming in better than estimates. Here with more is Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Hey, Nate. Banks are by far this week's biggest Stock 600 gainer in Europe. The earnings supporting the relief rally with some pretty encouraging signs in the numbers. Joining us now for analysis, Bloomberg Global Finance correspondent Shanali Bassick in the studio. Good to see you. Bright spot, normally not a phrase I would associate with European Bank. Yeah. Let's start with the trading. Deutsche Bank, Barclays, Standard Chartered. Trading was just bonkers.
Trading was a very good sign, and it was a very good sign for someone like Deutsche Bank.
Who's doing all this trading? What are they trading?
Institutional clients listen. Businesses like rates have been very sluggish for a very long time, and for a company like Deutsche Bank that's been restructuring, it's a great sign that they're able to show some turnarounds at those investment banks. Barclays is generating as much fixed income revenue as Morgan Stanley is, punching as far as it's competing with Goldman. It's competing
that was a
with
surge there for Barclays.
Yeah, the thing is, all of these firms are warning that this might not be sustainable. So
I'm shocked.
But nonetheless, it really helped them weather what was a really tough quarter where they took massive provisions for loan losses in other parts of their business.
Okay, those loan loss provisions, basically anticipating that people are going to default on the loans that they owe these banks. Right. How do they come up with that number?
All in all, these have been lower numbers than we've seen at the big U.S. banks. The estimate at Barclays, they are anticipating 17% U.S. unemployment, which is higher than what JP Morgan had said. Remember, the European banks are coming weeks later than the U.S. banks, so they have the benefit of this crisis sinking in a little more to make estimates that are guided from what we've seen in the last couple of weeks.
There's still the formula that they come up with a loan loss provision numbers. You have to plug in an unemployment number, and these, we should point out, are all guesses.
Listen, it'll get worse, and everyone doesn't pretend that it won't. So we know we'll see worse. These European banks have a lot of regulatory relief coming on their side. The regulators are going to want to see them lend a lot, especially to smaller consumers and retail investors. So retail consumers. So when the big clients, right, the big multinational companies are bleeding, how much firepower does that give them to lend to the average ordinary person.
Okay, what do you expect? None of this is sustainable. The good points, right? That's the bottom line here for me.
Yes, the provisions could get much worse. The other thing, though, to say is that the capital buffers have been holding steady still. So worrying about these banks collapsing or failing right now is not in our...
They did get some, on that capital provisions, they got some relief on the regulatory front, right, in Europe?
So the European regulators are looking to allow them to lower their capital ratios and leverage ratios to take on more risk, lend more to clients, but still it's not enormous risk. This is not pre-2008 levels, massive bets on your own books kind of risk. But hopefully it will allow them to lend more, as you pointed out before the show, in a world where they're grappling with negative interest rates.
Janali, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. You'll join us later in the morning as well. Bloomberg Global Finance correspondent Janali Basic with the European bank earnings that we've gotten so far. And the stock's 600 right now. That is up 0.2% here in the United States, ahead of the cash open. Dow Jones futures right now up 202 points. S&P futures, they're up 28 points. The NASDAQ E-mini futures up 102 points. And you're listening to Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
On air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. Nearly 70 residents with COVID-19 have died at a Massachusetts home for veterans. Federal and state officials are investigating whether residents were denied medical care at Holyoke Soldiers Home. President Trump keeps the nation's food supply chain rolling.
Meatpacking plants will keep their doors open due to an executive order signed by President Trump that could protect them if the workers get sick.
That'll solve any liability problems where they have certain liability problems, and we'll be in very good shape.
It's one of the moves to help boost the U.S. economy, but some, like Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, says reopening too soon may be dangerous.
Over the past 3 days, we have seen the highest number of people coming in related to COVID-19 than we have during the entirety of this pandemic.
I'm John Lawrence.
Dow futures are 180 points higher. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and European shares are fluctuating a bit while Asian stocks gained, along with U.S. stock index futures, as investors count down to more big earnings, a Federal Reserve policy decision, and key U.S. economic data. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures, they're up 27 points. Dow futures up 190. NASDAQ futures up 100. The DAX in Germany's up about 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 8/32, yield 0.58%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is up 15.5%, up $1.90 to $14.24 a barrel. COMEX gold is down about 0.2% or $2.60 at $17.1960 an ounce. The euro 1.0862 against the dollar. British pound 1.2417, and the yen is at 106.50. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Trump took action to prevent a possible meat shortage as meatpacking plants around the country are closed by outbreaks of COVID-19. The president signed an executive order under the Defense Production Act to keep plants open as critical infrastructure. Major meat processors say they've taken steps like temperature checks and plexiglass to protect workers from each other, but some workers say more protections are needed. Former Vice President Joe Biden has won Ohio's presidential primary. Yesterday's contest was less about the Democratic nomination and more about how the state's going to conduct elections in the era of the coronavirus. It comes as former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton endorsed Biden. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:49 now on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg Daybreak live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Let's take a closer look at earnings in the technology sector this morning. Google's parent company Alphabet is out of the gate with sales that beat estimates. We're going to hear from Facebook later today. Paul Sweeney's with us now, host of Bloomberg Surveillance and Bloomberg Markets here on Bloomberg Radio. Some strong results from Alphabet on the cloud and YouTube side. Paul, what stands out to you from these earnings?
Yeah, actually, I think, given the context of the environment we're living in right now, some pretty solid results out of Google here. The company, Ruth Porat, the CFO, said, January and February were really, really strong for the company. March, however, when the pandemic really hit, was noticeably weaker. So that'll be an issue for the second quarter, clearly. But all in all, really strong results coming out of the business for the first quarter. But this is a company that's driven by advertising revenue. And what we're going to find, I think the company suggested, is that advertisers in the second quarter are really, really pulling back here. So I think the good first quarter, concerns clearly about the second quarter and going forward. But all in all, a pretty solid quarter out of Google, given everything that's going on.
Yeah, how big a surprise is it that the sales overall did as well in the first quarter, given the dip in ad revenue that Alphabet signaled even before it came out with its full results?
Yeah, it kind of goes to the diversified nature of Google. Now, still about 80% of the revenue is advertising driven, so they're still really dependent upon that. And let's be clear here, a lot of advertisers that have been with Google in years past are not going to be there when we come out on the other side of that. A lot of small businesses, mid-sized businesses are just not going to be there on the other side. So it's something that all ad-driven media companies, including the digital companies, are going to have to deal with. But they have a diversified business model. They have a big cloud business, not as big as Amazon, but certainly big and growing, just like Microsoft has. So that's very good for them. Plus, YouTube is a huge business for them, and they saw great growth in YouTube in the quarter. But again, YouTube is an advertising-driven company, so they will see the negative impacts as advertisers pull back on some of their spending here in the context of the pandemic. But again, I think given everything, a pretty solid quarter.
Yeah, I was going to say, given the dependency that YouTube has on ad revenue, is it going to be able to counterbalance that with the cloud business and that growth opportunity that Alphabet might have as it heads into the second quarter?
Probably in the second quarter, the answer is probably no in the short term. But I think longer term, a lot of investors are saying this pandemic and how consumers are changing their behavior is probably going to accelerate the shift of ad spending from traditional media, broadcast television, cable television, more towards digital media. And longer term, this probably plays into the benefit of the Googles of the world, of the Facebooks of the world.
Yeah, let's get into Facebook. Obviously, another hugely ad-driven business. How much of a drag is that going to be on the results we could get after the close today?
Yeah, I think we're going to see something similar for Facebook. Now, the good news for these digital media companies, including Facebook, is that people are spending more time on their social media these days. And when you think about Facebook, you think about Facebook.com, obviously, but also Instagram and WhatsApp and things like that. And so more time spent on those media is good for their businesses. It's good from an advertising perspective. But again, the reality is that advertisers are cutting back dramatically during this pandemic, and that's impacting all ad-driven media. So Facebook I'm sure they'll have similar type results from Google here in the first quarter. Good first 2 months, probably a much weaker March, and they're probably going to warn that their second quarter numbers are going to be negatively impacted by advertisers just pulling back, given all the uncertainty in the marketplace. But again, Facebook has got a tremendous business in terms of the number of users on their platforms, and the time they're spending on those platforms is also increasing, and that bodes well longer term for ad trends there.
Yeah, it's got to be said, Snap, of course, came out with a much better result last week than a lot of people were expecting on all the time spent on that social media. I mean, could that be a signal for what we get from Facebook today?
I think it might be. I think it really might be, and that's good news for the big platforms like Facebook and Instagram, because they have the real mass of users that advertisers really want to reach. So when advertisers do come back on the other side of this pandemic, they're going to do what they typically do. They're going to look for a really big audience, and they're going to look for an audience that's really engaged. And where do you find those? You really find them with the Facebook platforms. Again, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger. So I think most investors feel like short-term pain for a lot of these ad-driven media companies, but longer term, a lot of these digital players like Facebook, like Google, are going to be in a good position longer term.
All right, thanks for this, Paul. Good having you with us this morning. Paul Sweeney, host of Bloomberg Surveillance, coming up later this morning, as well as Bloomberg Markets here on Bloomberg Radio. And looking ahead to those Facebook earnings after the close of cash trading later today. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
President Trump signed an executive order to compel meat processors to remain open, but OSHA says employers should still do their best to follow recent guidelines on protecting workers. The Patent and Trademark Office is extending certain filing and payment deadlines because of the coronavirus outbreak, and a dance instructor who paid for a Zoom video communication subscription is suing Zoom in California federal court. Stacy Simmons says uninvited men were joining the pole dancing classes she's been conducting online during the pandemic.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. The Supreme Court ruling the federal government must pay insurers $12 billion to cover losses they incurred providing risky policies under the Affordable Care Act. For more on the 8-1 decision, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Abby Gluck, a professor at Yale Law School.
What's the significance of this decision by the court?
Well, June, it's a really exciting decision for a couple of reasons. One, you've got 8 justices, and really 9, because Justice Alito's dissent was on different procedural grounds, upholding the legitimacy of the Affordable Care Act and telling Congress that it has to stand by its promises to pay the many private implementers it has tasked to implement the law. It's an acknowledgement of how much the Affordable Care Act relies on the insurance industry and the importance of keeping its promises to it.
It seems that this is a pretty clear case for the insurers, yet the Federal Circuit ruled that Congress had the right not to appropriate the funds. How did they come to that ruling?
Well, the lower court's divided, and part of the issue in this case is whether Congress could expressly or impliedly repeal an obligation that it made very explicitly in the text of the statute. And what the Supreme Court said was, no, you can't use an appropriations rider, sort of a sideways approach, to impliedly repeal a clear textual commitment on which the insurance industry relied. The other thing I would emphasize, June, is that this is a $12 billion case. The former Solicitor General of the United States, Paul Clement, who argued some of the earlier Affordable Care Act cases, interestingly enough, on the other side, has said several times that you don't see a lot of $12 billion cases at all. And here we are with the Affordable Care Act back in the Supreme Court, and it just shows you how much money is at stake in the law and how important it's become to the economy.
And that's Yale Law Professor Abby Gluck speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures are up 25 points this morning. Dow futures up 172 and NASDAQ futures up 92. NYMEX crude oil is up more than 14.5%, up $1.80 at $14.14 a barrel. Brent is up 3.9%. It's at $21.25. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated, and it's easier than ever for people to make an honest mistake and lose their money. TSB doesn't think anyone should have to pay for being an innocent victim of fraud on their account. That's why they've created the TSB Fraud Refund Guarantee. To find out more, visit tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. coronavirus cases pass 1 million as the pandemic claims more lives than the Vietnam War.
Prospects for a vaccine are looking up, according to the nation's leading infectious disease expert.
President Trump takes action to prevent a meat shortage as more processing plants close their doors.
COVID-19 numbers on the decline in New York, plus President Trump ties virus aid for states to policy on sanctuary cities. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. There's a new report on how baseball will return. 3 10-team divisions, games only within the division and played at home stadiums.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Hey, good Wednesday morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are gaining this morning. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 26 points. The Dow futures up 181. NASDAQ futures up 93. The DAX in Germany's up 0.4%. The CAC in Paris is little change, down about 0.1%. And FTSE 100 is up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury up 6/32, yield 0.59%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is up almost 15%, up $1.82 at $14.16 a barrel. COMEX gold down about 0.1%, down $2.40 at $17.1970 an ounce. The euro 1.0855 against the dollar. The yen is at 106.48. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin with 2 grim milestones in the coronavirus outbreak. Cases in the U.S. have passed 1 million, and the pandemic has now claimed more lives than the Vietnam War. Still, the rate of infection is slowing. Joining us now with the latest is Bloomberg's Tom Busby. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Daily U.S. coronavirus cases rose 2.5%. That's below the past week's 3.3% rate. That spread is slowing sharply in New York State with just a 1% increase. Governor Andrew Cuomo reported another decline in daily deaths, though the rate remains high.
Every day, I think maybe today is the day the nightmare will be over, but it's not. 335 people passed away yesterday from this virus in this state.
Overall, more than 17,000 New Yorkers have succumbed to the virus. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thank you. Despite the grim news, there is hope. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who also has overseen the response to every outbreak since HIV, is cautiously optimistic on the prospects for a vaccine. He spoke at a virtual event hosted by the Economic Club of Washington.
Hopefully, by the time we get to this coming winter, we will know whether or not we have a safe and effective vaccine. And then the challenge will be to scale it up enough to be able to distribute it meaningfully.
There are currently more than 90 vaccine candidates in the pipeline, including efforts from Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, and GlaxoSmithKline.
Well, the latest impact from the virus has meat processing plants across the country shutting down. Now, President Trump has signed an executive order to keep them open.
And that'll solve any liability problems where they had certain liability problems, and we'll be in very good shape. We're working with Tyson, which is one of the big companies in that world.
The president will use the Defense Production Act to keep plants open as critical infrastructure. That's after Tyson Foods ran ads in national newspapers saying the food supply chain was broken.
Meantime, one of the biggest U.S. meat suppliers says the pandemic will reshape the way we eat forever. Cargill CEO Dave McLennan spoke exclusively on Leadership Live with David Rubenstein, heard weekly on Bloomberg Television.
So far, I think the industry has been able to run. We've had tremendous support from the USDA in terms of having the inspectors on site. You can't run a plant without USDA inspectors. So I think it remains to be seen of how we're going to manage that dynamic between the health and emotional safety and physical safety of the workers in the plants and the executive order, of which we're still studying the details.
Cargill CEO Dave McLennan sees the pandemic resulting in a long-term shift in people eating more meals at home. So far, the restaurant industry has seen more than 8 million workers laid off. The National Restaurant Association sees the industry losing more than $80 billion in sales by the end of this month.
Well, we turn now to the earnings fallout from the outbreak. Alphabet is posting strong results despite the pandemic, with cloud and YouTube revenue jumping in the quarter. John Freeman is Vice President of Equity Research at CFRA.
Revenue growth is clearly, already decelerating for Google, but I actually don't think it's going to be that bad as the overall industry, and they're going to come out of it, a year from now even stronger than they were.
While Google's ad sales slumped in March, sales still topped estimates. That has Alphabet shares higher by 8% in early trading.
Some other results we're watching: Ford Motor reporting a $5 billion loss for the second quarter. Shares are down about 3% in the pre-market. That was a forecast. AMD also gave a lackluster forecast that has shares down 2% and is also weighing on other chipmaker stocks. And Starbucks sees lingering effects from the coronavirus pandemic, trimming same-store sales in China by as much as 25%. Starbucks shares lower by 1%.
Earnings also rolled in overnight for some of Europe's biggest banks. We get details on those results now from Bloomberg's John Tucker, who joins us live. John?
Hey, good morning, Nathan. European bank earnings haven't been that bad. Deutsche Bank says money set aside for loans that people can't pay back could peak in the first half after reaching the highest level in 6 years. The fixed income trading revenue advanced more than analysts had expected. The bank is making better progress on efficiency. Barclays reported a surge in trading revenue. And while Standard Chartered's loan loss provision surged to almost $1 billion, its pre-tax earnings beat estimates. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you. Back here in the U.S., a big day for economic news. We get an initial reading on first quarter growth, plus a policy decision from the Federal Reserve. Here with more, Bloomberg economics correspondent Michael McKee.
After almost 11 years, the longest expansion in U.S. history is almost certainly over. First quarter GDP forecast to have contracted for the first time since the Great Recession, the economy shut down by the coronavirus. The pandemic led the Fed to shift almost overnight from sustaining the expansion to keeping the economy from crashing further. After cutting borrowing costs to zero and creating 9 different programs to lend into the economy, policymakers aren't expected to take additional action at this meeting, but their task may not be done. The first quarter GDP drop pales against expectations for the second quarter, with the worst estimate for a 65% pace of contraction. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Michael. In other earnings news, Anthem beat and Hasbro withdrew its guidance. And straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, thank you, Karen. It's 6:07 on Wall Street now. Time to check the latest world and national news headlines. For that, we turn to Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says there were 335 new deaths from the coronavirus. He also noted the number of new COVID hospitalizations was below 1,000 for the first time in more than a month. Cuomo says, though, reopening the state must be done logically.
We want to reopen, but we want to do it without infecting more people or overwhelming the hospital system.
Cuomo also says he is going to deal with homeless people sleeping in subway cars, saying it's disrespectful to the essential workers who need to ride the subway system. Cuomo added it's not even safe for homeless people who have no face masks. The temporary hospital at the Javits Center in Manhattan will be shutting down operations by May 5th. Governor Cuomo's office also says other temporary hospitals built by FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers will also begin closing soon. President Donald Trump indicated he wouldn't allow federal aid for states facing budget deficits from the coronavirus outbreak unless they take action against sanctuary cities. President Trump has long complained about the cities and has previously sought to cut off their federal funding unless they end the policies. California may start the school year in the summer. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Governor Gavin Newsom says he's worried about the loss of our kids' learning time.
And so we are considering the prospect of an even earlier school year into the fall. As early as late July, early August.
He says as long as numbers of cases continue to go down, he says reopening too soon could be very dangerous, though. But the possibility of late July or early August does exist. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
A vaccine to halt the coronavirus pandemic could be available as early as this year for vulnerable groups such as healthcare workers. That's according to the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Hillary Clinton says she's endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden for president. Clinton says he has the experience and leadership qualities for the job.
Think of what it would mean if we had a real president, not just somebody who plays one on TV.
Clinton served with Biden in the Senate and was Secretary of State when Biden was Vice President. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks for coming up to 6:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashauer.
Good morning, Nathan. Every day seems to bring a new report on baseball's plans for its return. The latest comes from USA Today that 30 teams will split into 3 10-team divisions based on geography. So the Mets and Yankees would be with the likes of the Red Sox, Orioles, Nationals, and Phillies, and however many games they can squeeze in would all be against teams within the division. The other big wrinkle is that they would play in their home stadiums, albeit without fans. Yankee manager Aaron Boone wants to get back to work.
It seems like as more time goes off the clock and as, every day, obviously, hopefully is bringing more information, more opportunity, it does seem like maybe more plans are becoming feasible. So we just have to see how the next days and weeks play out, and hopefully we can have, as Kirshen said, the best of those bad plans. But I think a lot of us, and I know a lot of sports fans would love to see some way, shape, or form us back and performing, and I can't wait.
Boone on ESPN last night after they showed what's known as the Aaron Boone game, the home run he hit to win the 2003 pennant. The Orioles' Trey Mancini, who hit 35 home runs last season, says no matter what the season looks like, he won't play. Mancini is recovering from stage 3 colon cancer. Harlan Savarli has died at 89. He was a linebacker for the Giants when they won the 1956 NFL championship. And then when Tom Landry left the Giants to go coach the Dallas Cowboys, Savarli became the defensive coordinator while he was still an active player. He was the head coach of the Rams at age 31. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, we have results this morning from the virtual Madrid Open. This is the first video game tournament of the outbreak involving professional tennis players, and it was no contest. Andy Murray easily defeated Rafael Nadal 3-0. In fact, Nadal only won a single point in the match, which took less than 10 minutes to play. Prize money is going to be split between tennis players hurt financially and virus-related charities. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, Managing Director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and Head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and
The football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick.
The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Here's Menace Crenny.
Standard Chartered has put aside $956 million against potential losses as problem loans spike during the coronavirus pandemic. And joining us now is the CFO, Andy Halford. So, Andy, great to have you with Nera and I this morning. The market wants to get to grips with understanding where you are right now with your loan loss provisions and how tough or how bad a number we could look at for 2020. So take us through the numbers and the guidance for the end of the year.
Okay, good morning to you. So just very quickly on the numbers, we've actually had a strong start to the year, especially given the external environment. So our top line actually was up by 6% for the quarter, and that was in a period when particularly the coronavirus was impacting our businesses in Northern Asia. So overall, actually, a very strong start on the top line, good control of expenses. The one area that you've referred to where we have taken additional charges was the credit impairment. And I think, like with most banks, there has been obviously a need to top up on the provisions given the current environment.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this headline, crossing the Bloomberg, General Electric reporting first quarter profit that missed analyst estimates, coming in at 5 cents a share. Analysts were looking for 7 cents. Again, that just crossing. S&P futures up 21 points this morning. Dow futures up 142. NASDAQ futures up 83. 10-year Treasury 8.30 seconds, yield 0.58%, and NYMEX crude oil is up more than 15% at $14.20 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Donald Trump has ordered meat processing plants to remain open amid concerns over growing coronavirus cases and the impact on the nation's food supply. An executive order signed by the president uses the Defense Production Act to classify meat processing as critical infrastructure to keep plants open and prevent a shortage of chicken, pork, and other meat on supermarket shelves. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks much, Michael. It's 6:18 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's get more now on the impact of COVID-19 in this country as we've hit a couple of key milestones. The number of confirmed cases in the U.S. has now topped 1 million, and we have more than 57,000 deaths, more than the toll from the Vietnam War. Dr. Andy Pekos is back with us on this Wednesday morning, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Good to talk with you, as always, Dr. Pekos. What do you make of